Hey! Hey, it's Brayden! And I'm joined by Logan. And this is...
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me you built a time machine?
My mom always said, life was like a box of chocolates.
Stop, stop, stand there, do something!
Health, sleep, murder.
Absolutely.
Gobsmack.
How are you today, Logan?
Good. Nice and warm.
Just good?
Yeah. Well, I mean, better because again, it's warm.
Nice. I love warmness.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, we're back after a couple of weeks. Life's just busy, guys. Sometimes it just... time goes by super fast, and it's like, what? You don't realize that it's been more than a week since the last episode's been released. I did space out the rant to like a week or two after our last episode, even though we recorded the rant literally right after the episode. So if you guys haven't listened to that, it's only a few minutes. So we wanted to see what you guys thought, the feedback on, what you think of the rants. If people listened so far, it seems people are listening. So there's that. Also, merch. We're considering releasing merch. We're trying to figure things out, what to release, shirts, hats. Should we give them away as part of a subscription based for like Patreon, or should we just sell them straight from our website, or both? So that's up in the air right now. We still need more listeners if we want to consider that. Maybe we'll see. So, keep letting people know about the podcast. We're going to start releasing more regularly now. We just need to light a fire under Logan's butt. And,
A fire has been lit. Let me tell you.
So we'll talk about it. We'll think about it. We're discussing it, but just wanted to throw those snowballs out there for you. And today, Logan, before we get into the subject, just wanted to ask if there's anything that you wanted to update us on or talk about.
No. I mean, I think you got everything. We probably would have had another episode out sooner, if it wasn't for that week where we didn't have power.
That's right. I'm like, why didn't we release an episode?
Yeah. Which set. I don't know about how it happened with Braden, but at least with me, I was set back an extra week after that because of catching up on work and other things. So
yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
We were without power for about 4 days. So
I went from Monday to Sunday, so without power.
Oh wow. Yeah, we got power back. We went Monday to Friday, so we got power back Friday, and then we got internet back the next day. So, yeah, we're in Texas, so that happened. So if you guys want to give us a break, we would appreciate that. And today, I know everyone's excited because we're going to talk about some men in tights.
We're men in tights, tights.
And we all know how Braden feels about men in tights.
Logan, so I got to tell you, I decided for the first time ever to create a list of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I've only ever thought about like my top 3 or 4. I've never actually decided to sit down and try and make a list. I'm not saying that my list is final, but I finally was able to just put together a rough draft of my top 10 movies. And I couldn't believe it myself because I needed to be honest with myself and truly put the top 10 of my personal favorite movies. And that includes quality, rewatchability, nostalgia, all of that, right? And Robin Hood Men in Tights made it onto number 10 on my list. And I didn't expect that myself, but, I had some time to think about it, and it did it, and I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly surprised, and I know that there'll be people out there, for the like three people who listen to us, um, who will say that that's absolutely atrocious. Because if you just look at the Rotten Tomato score for the movie,
Yeah.
it actually did pretty bad. But it's funny because it's like one of those movies where you ask one person, they hated it, and another person, and they loved it. I thought it was hilarious for one.
It's got to be your kind of humor, right? Um, to me, and this isn't necessarily universal, but at least to me and a lot of my friends, including you, right? This is one of the more quotable movies, even more so, at least in my inner circle, than The Princess Bride. Um, I mean, everyone that's like me or that gets along with me tends to like this movie. um, and another,
Inconceivable.
well, that's Princess Bride, but
I know. That's the joke.
terrible joke.
Oh
Um,
my
but
gosh.
another reason why it's on my top 10 list is because I love a good comedy, and I'm very picky about comedies personally. I love to laugh, but um, as far as movies go, it's very hard for me to find a movie that makes me laugh, even just a few times, if not throughout the entire movie. And this movie still makes me laugh. There are other movies like that, like Dumb and Dumber, which I think is hilarious, you know. And then there are other so called comedies that I never found super funny. So, you know, I'm a unique person, I guess, or I'm a little different in that my comedy tastes aren't necessarily like everyone else, which is, I think that's the case with everyone. But in this case, I loved it so much that it made it onto my top 10. And there are a handful of comedies there in the top 10, usually towards the bottom of the list. But let's get into it, Logan. When is the last time, or when is the first time, I should say, that you've seen the movie? When did you first see the movie?
Honestly, I don't remember when. It had to have been I was fairly young. Um, and obviously, it's usually the dad that introduces these kind of comedy type movies. But man, it had to have come on TV or something. And my dad was like, "Oh man, we should." I'm pretty sure it was like in the middle of the movie. Um, because I don't remember the beginning of the movie. I've probably seen the movie like 6 or 7 times, and to this day, I don't really remember the beginning of the movie. Um, but I do remember it was. I probably was like 12 when I saw this movie for the first time.
Yeah. How old was I? Oof. So here's the thing, and this is kind of some background story for me. As a young kid growing up, I spent a lot of time, once we moved to this area, South Texas, I spent a lot of time at my stepdad's parents' house. So they're like step grandparents. And they had a treasure trove of movies, DVD, VHS, you name it. They had a ton of movies. And that's part of the influence into why, I enjoy doing podcasts like this and why I love movies is because I was introduced to so many classic movies as a young age. I mean, that's how I was introduced to Star Wars at such a young age, is because they had the original trilogy on VHS. I don't know how else I would have been introduced to Star Wars, but my older brother was like, "Hey, they have all the Star Wars movies," and I was probably like 5, 6, 7, maybe. And they're like, he was like, "I'm going to show them to you since you haven't seen them." And we watched them all in one sitting, at least the original three, and other movies that they would have on showing on TV, or I would spend time just watching movies over and over again. I was very good at working VHS and DVD player and TV, so I could do it all on my own and just go through movies. And Robin Hood Men in Tights was one of the movies that would be playing constantly, and that's just how I fell in love with it. It's like a nostalgia to where I saw it at a young age, and it left an impression or a mark on me. Even if I didn't understand the jokes, it was just it was entertaining. It was entertaining, and that's kind of what's going to lead me into my first fact. is you talked about the reviews. When this movie came out, this was like 6 years after Spaceballs. Um, I believe, yeah, this was the very next movie that Mel Brooks did after Spaceballs. He did it in 19. It came out in 1993, so it's an early 90s movie, and it's a parody of Robin Hood. Obviously, it's a comedy. It makes fun of Robin Hood, the story of Robin Hood, and it also pokes fun at the recently, at the time, released 1991 version of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, starring Kevin Costner. And that's kind of how the idea for this movie came about. Now, some history. Mel Brooks. This is not the first time Mel Brooks had attempted to parody Robin Hood. In the mid '70s, he came out with a TV show called "When Things Were Rotten," and the show was canceled after 13 episodes. But that show was basically a parody of Robin Hood. It was a They describe it as a fast-paced, gag-driven sitcom that put a satirical spin on Robin Hood. So, didn't get good reviews. Not a lot of people watched it, so it got canceled after just 13 episodes. But then, so what happened next was this little kid saw Prince of Thieves, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, starring Kevin Costner, and that movie didn't get very great reviews. And part of that was because Kevin Costner plays Robin Hood. Kevin Costner's an American. Robin Hood is obviously more of a British figure, right?
Yeah.
And his accent is really bad in the movie. I mean, it's like he doesn't even try to do an accent. So that's one of the things that was panned about this movie. And this little 11-year-old tells his dad, basically gives him an idea. Now, this dad is a dentist, but he was a Beverly Hills dentist, so he had really famous clientele, obviously, which included Hollywood screenwriter J. David Shapiro. Now, during an appointment, the dentist pitched the idea of a Robin Hood spoof movie to Shapiro, and the idea had originally come from his son. And Shapiro loved the idea, so the dentist and Shapiro both wrote the script together. Now, if one gave the ideas and the other actually wrote it, I'm not sure, but they worked together on it. And that's the script that eventually became Mel Brooks' movie. They sold it to him, and then Mel Brooks revised it rather heavily, actually. But that's where it was born. Robin Hood Men in Tights. Just for some background info. Now, you mentioned, or I mentioned about, how it left an impression because it was just so entertaining to me as a kid.
Mm.
Russell Crowe, who played Robin Hood in a later adaptation, says to this day that Robin Hood Men in Tights is the most entertaining movie of all the Robin Hood movies. Would you agree with that?
For me, the issue for me is that I saw the 91 version of Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one has always been like, it was my mom's favorite. And you know how like my mom was really the one who introduced me to a lot of movies and stuff.
Right.
I don't really know if it is my dad's, but because it was my mom's, that one always stuck with me. Because my dad, unless it was just me and my dad watching, he would usually turn on something that everybody would enjoy. That was always, if it was on, would be something that everybody would accept. My mom didn't really like Men in Tights, but it would be a very, very close second, if not first, for me.
Yeah, I never was a fan of that one. I guess as a kid it was too dark for me, and I guess I just kind of found it boring. There are aspects to it that I do like, I guess, but of course Morgan Freeman, right? But in the long run, I can't stop watching Robin Hood Men in Tights. To me, that one I go back to over and over and over again. I have it on Blu-ray. It's like more of a chill, pop it in, and when you're relaxing, watch it and laugh kind of movie. Um,
Yeah, it wasn't very thematic. It's very
right.
it doesn't take itself seriously, and like most spoof movies don't. And you could even see it with Mel Brooks. Kind of has a very specific way of shooting his movies. I've kind of noticed. Uh, it's very as if you're just like a face in the crowd, like watching in on the events and unfolding before you. Um,
Yeah.
Whereas with, like you said, the other Robin Hood is very dark.
And also, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's obviously a spoof, a parody, but I don't think, and I do kind of appreciate this about Mel Brooks movies in general. I don't think it ever goes too far. You know how sometimes these movies they'll throw in cringe jokes, and I don't mean like cringe like The Office, like funny cringe. I mean like fart jokes and stuff like that. It's just not very funny. To me, it doesn't ever cross that line. It's still hilarious, yet there's still a story to it that you can follow. You know what I mean? There's an ending. There's a sword fight scene at the end. He goes and saves her, and it all makes sense. Obviously, it's Robin Hood, right? But the jokes are just they put just the right amount of jokes in there. Where I always really appreciate the movie. I mean, there's nonstop one-liners and quotes and things like that. What are some of your favorite lines, or maybe your favorite line from the movie or scene?
Um, it has to be the entire scene with a Chew. Whenever he first meets a Chew, he comes up and he goes, "I'm looking for a Chew," and all the guards who are like roughing up this poor black guy turns around and goes, "Bless you." And I remember watching that, and even as a kid, 12, 11, 12 years old, I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
I was at first I was like, "What does he mean to chew?" And then they all turned around and said, "Bless you," and it clicked. Like that's the joke. Oh my gosh, that will always be in my head forever and always.
Yeah, that joke, I don't know why. It's so stupid, yet it's still funny today, every time I watch it. And I still ask myself why.
Well,
That,
and how Dave Chappelle, just his entire character, how he operates his character,
yeah.
he doesn't try to fit. I mean, obviously, with a lot of Mel Brooks movies, he kind of has everybody fit a stereotype. But Dave Chappelle is just Dave Chappelle in the movie. And I
Which is
love it.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. They don't need to do anything.
Yeah, that reminds me. Probably my favorite line, I don't know, I have so many. It's also an Achu joke, but it's a little different. So later on, when Robin and Achu go to Robin's family castle and they're hauling it away because I guess, the bank took over the
Yeah.
property or whatever. It was seized. His property was seized, so they haul this castle away. And you see his blind servant Blinken, right? Robin, the family servant, he's blind, and he's sitting on the toilet, and he's reading a Braille Playboy magazine. This is the craziest scene. It's so ridiculous. And then Robin's introducing Blinken. We'll fast forward a little bit, a couple minutes. Robin introduces Blinken. He says, "This is a Jew," and then Blinken goes, "A Jew here?"
Uh, or later on, I remember later on in the movie, whenever they're talking about making a Chew the sheriff, the new sheriff, um, he goes, one of the townspeople was like, "A black sheriff." Blinken goes, "He's black." Everything every joke with Blinken and the Chew is just so gold. Oh.
Yeah, it's I don't know. This movie's just hilarious if you really pay attention. Now, a Chew's played by Dave Chappelle. Now, I don't think most people, even Dave Chappelle fans, maybe, I'm sure a lot of them do, but I don't think they realize that this movie is really what helped shoot him into superstardom. Obviously, he's a stand-up comedian. That's what he's known for, and that's what he's best at. But at the time of the casting of this movie, he was unknown. He was not a famous comedian. In fact, he was only 19 years old when they cast him into this movie. I don't know if you realize that.
Did not know that. That's crazy.
So what happened first was Mel Brooks cast Robin Hood first. So he gave Cary Elwes. I looked up the pronunciation. Okay, this time he gives him a call, and he's from Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks is like, hey, this is Mel Brooks. I'd like to cast you as Robin Hood in my next movie. Cary Elwes thought it was a prank, so he hung up on him. Okay, Mel Brooks.
Yeah, right. Click. That's hilarious. Even the making of this movie is hilarious. But continue, sorry.
So Mel Brooks calls him back, says, "Don't hang up. It's really me." And Cary Elwes has to apologize because he didn't believe it the first
Oh, I
time,
thought he
right?
was going to hang up again.
And they had to find another actor.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, he came on board immediately as Robin Hood. No dispute there or anything like that. Like we're going to talk about later on, by the way. And then they cast a Chew. Now, both Mel Brooks and Cary Elwes were involved in the casting process for this character. They both chose him. They saw a lot of actors come in and basically, audition for the role. But when Dave Chappelle came in, this unknown 19-year-old stand-up comedian, they were amazed by him. They knew he was going to be a star. That's what I'm paraphrasing, but I'm partially quoting them. That they knew he was a star when they laid eyes on him. So, the rest is history. He's an integral part of this movie. His the fact that his American accent, doesn't go along with the rest of the British actors in the movie is perfect in my opinion. But yeah. Now I will say that there is a few dated jokes in this movie. For example, when Robin and Achu first meet, and Robin steps in to help him, Achu's who's getting beat up, as you mentioned, and Dave Chappelle says, "Hold up, I gotta get some air," and he pumps his shoes up with air. At the time, they were released these, I don't know if they were Nikes or Jordans or whatever, where you could literally pump them up. I don't know what the ploy was there or what the catch was, but they were trying to sell shoes, and that's one of the things they came up with at the time. Obviously, for the longest time, I still didn't get that joke, but it's because it's dated, right? But most of the jokes in this movie are still hilarious. They're timeless, and really just a great, hilarious movie. Now, some of the other actors in this movie, Roger Reese plays, Sheriff of Rottingham, because that's the name of it. They changed it from Nottingham to Rottingham. And then Richard Lewis, who also has an American accent, he's an American comedian, plays King. What is it? Prince John. Sorry, not King Richard. Prince John. So the younger brother, right? And his comedy works very well because he's very deadpan. You know what I mean? Like he's very straight faced. He'll it's almost like he's trying to be serious. It's kind of that kind of humor, right? Yeah. Even though everything's just a big joke, this whole movie is just a comedy. So I really like him in this movie. Also, and we're going to talk about this now. Go ahead.
Well, just to interrupt you really quick, to add to what you said about his deadpan humor, I think it was brilliant, the decision to make him have a mole. that moved throughout the movie. Like that's kind of how they fix his deadpan humor for
Yeah.
like audiences who wouldn't get it. So they could have something to laugh at. And that was a moment of comedy throughout the movie. But anyways, continue.
No, and then the scene when the sheriff of Rottingham goes, was it your mole on the other side of your face? Prince John goes, I have a mole?
He was so serious about it too. So surprised. Oh my gosh.
There's just some great you know. So we're gonna talk about casting some actors and actresses that could have been in this movie. Now, one of my favorite comedian actresses, because of the movie Clue. We haven't done Clue yet, have we? We got to do Clue. Madeline Kahn, who's been in quite a few um, of Mel Brooks's movies: Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, History of the World Part One. Um, and she was gonna play Latrine, but Latrine has a very small part in the movie. She's not really in it that much. She has like a little side story. She has a crush on the sheriff of Rottingham, but there were some concerns because apparently she turned down the role because of the salary. I guess she wasn't to her pay grade, which I understand. I mean, she's actually an Academy Award winning nominated actress, comedian, but one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best comedian actresses of all time. And Mel Brooks says that he didn't cast her because the character didn't have much screen time. So, and Tracy Ullman, who's another comedian, British comedian, ended up getting the part. But I would have loved to see Madeline Kahn in this movie because I'm a big fan of hers. Her role in Clue, just her and Tim Curry make that movie just so much better. It's just they carry that movie so well. And then Sean Connery wanted to play King Richard.
Mhm.
I don't know if you knew this, but obviously Sean Connery plays King Richard in the Prince of Thieves movie, right?
Yep.
Um, he wanted to come in into this movie, but he wanted to wear a dress. That was his idea. He was because King Richard has a cameo at the end of the movie,
Yep.
And he wanted to wear a dress. So he wanted to dress up in drag for the role, but he said he would only do it. He wanted $1 million, and he was going to donate the $1 million to some Scottish charities. But they couldn't afford that. That was too expensive for them. So that's how Patrick Stewart got cast instead. And I can kind of understand that just because it's like one scene. You know what I mean? For $1 million, which back then was a lot more. You know, I mean, nowadays they'll do cameos maybe for $1 million or for like some people don't even they just do it for free, but it's a little different at the time. But for a small budget movie like this, $1 million was quite a bit, you know.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And what was their budget? It wasn't much, was it?
It says here her budget was $20 million.
Yep.
So
So I mean, that's that's a big chunk of their budget.
yeah,
$1 million would end up being, um, geez, yeah, quite a bit.
yeah. So that makes sense. But I think I would have. Well, what do you think about King? I think King Richard in drag is a little too far. I don't think it would go with the rest of the movie.
Um, I think they could have probably pulled it off. I think there could have been a way to do it, but they were kind of already toning down the movie, coming to a close. I think you're right. I think it was the last jokes are coming in, and they were going to finish the movie, and it was going to be a happy ending. And yeah, I as much as it would have been hilarious to see Sean Connery coming up in a dress, I don't think it would have. If it was like earlier in the movie, maybe, but yeah,
Now, I mentioned earlier that I thought the movie never really crossed the line with humor. Now that I'm thinking of it, there is one scene. I'm not saying it's crossing the line as far as potty humor, but I still don't like the joke. I don't like it because I don't think it's funny. I think it's stupid, and I think it's overdoing it. I don't know if you remember when Robin Hood is trying to give a speech because he gets all these volunteers to come and help them storm the castle and take over and get rid of all the bad guys, right? Um, so he gets a bunch of volunteers and he has to train them to sword fight, to to shoot a bow and arrow, to do a bunch of stuff, right? Because they're all incompetent, just villagers. So
Yeah.
um, I think it's either after or before. I think it's after he's trained them. He has to give them this rousing speech, and he says, hear thee, lend me thy ears," or something like that, right? And they all take off their ears and throw all their ears at him. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah, I do.
They like take off one of their ears and start, and you just see a bunch of ears flying in at them. I never thought that was funny.
I yeah, that's even with the arrow that's a rocket. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ridiculous stuff in this movie. The mole
I
up his
thought that one at least gave me a chuckle, like, or like, what the heck, like at least it grabbed my attention. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's something. I think the reason why that wasn't as funny is because you saw that coming from like a mile away,
Yeah.
and you're like, ugh, whatever. Like they put no thought into that. If they made it like, I think they probably could have put a little bit more effort into that and made it a little bit funnier. But yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah. And Mel Brooks. Now, what do you think about Mel Brooks? Are you a fan of him? You just a fan of this movie? I mean, obviously, I'm sure you love Spaceballs too, right?
Yeah, I like Spaceballs. I mean, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a Mel Brooks fan,
Yeah.
uh, like per se. Not like how a lot of people are, um, you know, fans of like for
Directors.
instance. Hmm?
Directors, you mean?
Yeah, well, like, yeah, I mean, there's some directors. Whenever I hear their name, I'm like, oh, that movie might be interesting, um,
Right.
but it's not something like Kubrick or with the one in the room where and then Psycho.
Oh, you mean Alfred Hitchcock?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Oh, okay.
My memory. But yeah, no, like I'd say I'm a fan of Alfred Hitchcock. Um,
Right, right. Well, yeah, I am too.
so I mean, so not in that way. But yeah, if you said, hey, this movie is produced by Mel Brooks, I'd be like, you know what, I'd give that a go.
Right, right, right. Yeah. Uh, Young Frankenstein. That's something that I never understood. Those jokes were more mature, I guess, or went over my head more, not as like silly. Um, when I was younger, so I didn't get how good that movie was until I got older. But now I can appreciate Young Frankenstein for what it is. Of course, Spaceballs, we'll go over that too. Eventually, we'll cover it. Is hilarious in its own right. Um, but to me, like Robin Hood Men in Tights is more lighthearted and just something you can just throw on and know you're gonna enjoy and just chill, I guess. That's the best way I can describe it, you know? You can drink 5 beers and or a whole six pack, whatever you want to do.
I was about to say, why drink literally five? Just it's that kind of movie where you're not really gonna drink the sixth one. You're just gonna drink five.
Yeah. You'll save the sixth one for your cat or something. So
Oh, pretty-
so
oh my!
there's a sword fight scene. There's a few sword fight scenes. I love the one at the end where Robin Hood is far superior at sword fighting than the bad guy. It's not even close. I just love that. Like, I don't know. Like, usually I wouldn't like something like that, but it just works so well. Anyways, obviously, Carrie Elwes was in another swordplay movie. Oh, The Princess Bride. We discussed that last episode. Um, so he didn't really need a ton of training, just rehearsals, get some of the routines down. So he was actually a pretty good fencer, but everyone else was not that great. So they all had to attend a swordplay boot camp. These sessions were taught by Victor Paul. He's a fencing coordinator, but he did big budget action films, like stunt work on them, like Die Hard and Armageddon. So pretty big name in that regard. And so one thing that Elvis was not good at was archery, and which is something that Robin Hood is known for, right? So, if you remember in the movie, obviously he's he's perfect at archery. So, he actually hit the bullseye. I mean, it took a few takes, but he legit hit the bullseye, and he was actually really proud of that moment. Because he had struggled a little bit with the archery, even just when learning it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And they didn't have the budget to do a lot of takes, right?
Mhm.
So
It
they
was
could
good.
only go ahead.
No, it was just good that he got it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because they only had 3 takes to do it. Like the legit, that was like the best they could do, and he got it on the 3rd take, which is miraculous.
Yep. A lot of pressure. I mean, a lot
Yeah,
of pressure.
you can imagine. Another incident. So there's an incident on set. Richard Lewis, who plays Prince John, he got really sick. He got hepatitis A. So his fever went up to 106 degrees. He ended up being hospitalized. Now, he had filmed every scene already at this point except for one. So Mel Brooks calls him in this hospital room and gives him like this whole elaborate plan of how they're going to be able to get this one scene filmed, right? They were going to get him on a stretcher, drive him to the set. They're going to prop him onto this wood, and then they were going to have him deliver some lines. And that's what they were going to do. And he says, you're going to do your 2 lines. We're going to carry you back, take you back to the hospital. He said it would only take about 20 minutes total, right? And then Lewis says, Mel, I'm dying. I think I'm dying. I have 106 fever. I'm jaundiced. And he hung up. And then Mel Brooks calls him about 15 times to get him to do this final scene.
Dang. Oh my gosh. That's directors, man. He's like, I don't care. We're doing this movie. You're gonna die doing this movie.
You can call this the flu performance or something. I don't know. That's amazing. Now I don't know if you guys, all you listeners, you guys. But back in, what year was it? 2009. Mel Brooks was honored at the Kennedy Center. He's one of the honorees, along with Bruce Springsteen, Robert De Niro, and a few others. Okay. Now, they had different people perform songs for him, some of his songs from his movies, because I don't know if you know this, but, Mel Brooks created, like, the producers, and, a bunch of other his movies have songs in them. I wouldn't call Robin Hood Men in Tights a musical, per se, because there's only, like, a couple of musical performances, maybe, like, 2 or 3, but, sometimes you forget that there's some musical aspects to it. But he writes and comes up with the music for the songs. Now he had a composer for the movie who did the instrumentals, right? His name was, I think it's Hummy or Humie Man, which, by the way, the score of this movie is very underrated. I think it's fantastic. For a comedy especially. But they had Martin Short do the Blazing Saddles theme. They had Richard Kind. He did a jazzy rendition of the Spanish Inquisition number from History of the World Part 1. And then Jack Black, this is on YouTube, he does the performance of Men in Tights, the song Men in Tights. We're men in tights, which is a hilarious song. I sing it sometimes in the shower. But I thought that was cool. It's on YouTube if you want to see it. But that just goes to show how influential, and it's considered a cult. It's got a cult following. I don't know if you've heard that, but when movies that aren't necessarily well received or reviewed well when they came out, and then years later, people realize, hey, this movie still stands up or holds up, or it's even better than we thought, and a lot of people become fans of it, of a different generation, maybe. And that's what Robin Hood Men in Tights is considered to have a cult following. Where when it first came out, wasn't really a big deal. Um, but now, obviously, a lot more fans, including Jack Black, right? And Russell Crowe. Um, so that's kind of the impact the movie has. It's not an Academy Award winning movie. It's not even, to most people, it's not even a classic like The Princess Bride. But it's a very funny movie, and it's left a lasting impression on a lot of people, you know. Um, as far as financials, Logan, I know you usually do that. Do you have any numbers for me that you've crunched?
Well, just the fact that they did really well. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
they ended up making 67 million in the box office, which with a 20 million budget, it wasn't you know jaw dropping or anything, but
Right.
they did pretty good. In fact, it was their first weekend. Um, they did pretty okay. They made almost 7 million, and then from then on, it kind of dropped. There wasn't a lot of interest, and it wasn't actually out for that long.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, um, from the end of July, so July the 30th, August the 1st, all the way till September. So honestly, just a month, but they were able to make their money back. So I mean, that was worth. Um,
Now, yeah, it's not his best grossing movie as far as, movie theater run. But Mel Brooks did mention in an interview that both Spaceballs and Robin Hood Men in Tights are his top two selling movies of all time on DVD and VHS.
and that's honestly one of those things where critics aren't always right.
Mm-hmm.
You got to read the reviews of people who went to go see the movie who aren't writing for a a company that has been around for 100 years writing the newspaper, because they're going to have a very um I would say like altered view, very
Mm-hmm.
politically based a lot of times, and very saturated, I guess, because these people are usually watching movies over and over and over, um, and they usually forget to enjoy the movie. They're trying to
Mm-hmm.
pull it apart while they're watching it, so they can get their review out right away. Um, but yeah, so in this one, like you've said before, you gotta just sit there and enjoy it. It's not something that you gotta put a lot of effort into. Um, but not all movies need to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who spend thousands of hours on a statue, right? And it's beautiful. It's a wonderful piece of art. But art is also that little drawing that your daughter drew in like 5 minutes. So I mean, it's you can appreciate both without them being equal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And they're different in their own right. But what I do appreciate about Mel Brooks' movies his movies is his humor, and I've always enjoyed his humor. And I haven't seen all of his movies, so that's something that I can consider to go back and rewatch some of his other maybe lesser known but still Mel Brooks movies. Um, but yeah, I love his sense of humor, is his style. For example, I've noticed that he what he does is something that's super obvious to the audience. He'll make a joke out of, like with the mole, right? I have a mole, right? And he's black, stuff like that. Like even in Young Frankenstein, one of the most famous lines in comedy movie history is Igor the Hunchback assistant to Frankenstein, or Frankenstein. He his famous line is "What hump?" It's just like it's funny. It's funny because it's like what. So he uses that to his advantage, and just you know his last movie that he directed was in 1995. Didn't do very well. It was a spoof on Dracula and the whole Dracula story. I haven't seen that, of course, but it's funny because at the time when Robin Hood came out, one of the reviews was saying that basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but that he's might have lost his touch. One of the negative reviews is that time is passing him by. He was 67 years old at the time. Mel Brooks is still kicking today at 94 years old, which is just amazing, right? I mean, that's awesome. I mean, he got started with way back in the day. One of his earlier creations was the TV show Get Smart. And I think he's a comedy legend, you know?
Yeah, I think if you haven't seen one of his movies, you need to.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot. He had a lot to give in his movies, and he's not even done with movies. I mean, he's been in a lot of, from what IMDb says, he's been in quite a few movies. So, I mean, and a lot of them are comedies. So,
Yeah. He's a funny guy, you know?
mhm.
And he uses his Jewish heritage. He'll poke fun of at times in his movies too, because he's Jewish. So
And-
he'll throw that in there.
and that's one of those things where, whenever you can make fun of yourself, your comedy is always going to be taken very well, at least by the people. There might be people who have an agenda. Doesn't matter. For the people, it can be funny.
Right, exactly. So, what are we doing next episode, Logan?
Next episode, we are going to. What did we agree to?
Are we doing maybe Spaceballs? Can we do that one next?
Do you want to, or did you want to do something a little bit more serious?
Well, let's see. This is episode
31.
No, well, total, but I mean, among our series,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's 22. So serious obviously is going to be 25. Let's do another comedy, and then we'll do serious comedy, and then of course our 25 episode, which is going to be our person that passed away tragically, our true crime episode. So I don't mind doing Spaceballs. It goes with the theme. We did Princess Bride, and then we used Carrie Elwes to transfer over to this movie, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and then we'll use Mel Brooks to do Spaceballs next. Okay.
All right. I'm down. And then after that, we could do Independence Day. Use Bill Pullman.
Yeah, that's true. Which, by the way, I just found out my wife has not seen Independence Day.
What? Okay, well, I'm not going to get into it this time around, but
I'm not going to murder anyone today, but... All right. Well, Logan, what time is it?
it is time for, it's actually pretty close to bedtime.
You are a boomer. It's about to be 8 o'clock, so it's party's just getting started for me.
I mean, he woke up like an hour ago, so.
Don't even. So I will bid you all adieu. Good afternoon, good morning, good night, and good evening. No, let's start again. Okay, let's do it legit this time. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you listeners.
Where is the one that I love most of all? When will I hear him call Marianne, Marianne? He is the one who can make my life more joyful forevermore.
Where is the maid that I'm longing to see? Where can she be, my sweet Marianne, Marianne? Oh, when will I hold you here my arms, knowing you are my love.
I waited so patiently for a true love. When will he come for me? Where is he? Where is he?
In all my dreams, there's a vision I see. Your hand in mine, my dear Marian, Marian. There's no tomorrow without you, my love.